So what do you guys think about introductory missions from a board gaming perspective? This idea, and in this case, we're looking at Dungeon Saga, a dungeon crawler board game. If you've been following my channel, you know that I love dungeon crawlers. But there's a couple of things with Dungeon Saga that really set it apart, really make something that is very, very familiar. Go into the dungeon, smash some baddies, grab some loot, level up, overlord versus players, that help take it to something unique. And these little touches that I feel really, really work well, blending the game and the narrative, where you really feel like you're being immersed in not only the story, but with a very, and I mean this in a good way, with a very simplified rule set, having the ability to make some very, very tactical moves. And what we often see with games, especially now, is the idea of the tutorial, right? Gloomhaven is a perfect example where instead of walking through turn by turn in an actual rule book, you have the first mission that slowly or gradually introduces certain concepts. The idea being, you want to jump right in. I mean, that's how I am. I can barely contain myself. I get a new title and I want to jump right in and play it. I'm going to make some mistakes. There's going to be some challenges in the flow. I'm learning the rules, but I feel learning by doing, at least that's how my mind operates. I love the idea of a tutorial. I don't want it to just be like a checkpoint tutorial where it railroads me through the actual phases of the game. I want to make some choices. I want to be able to lose the tutorial, but I don't want to be completely overwhelmed. Dungeon Saga does this very interesting and very well in that the first two missions are actually tutorials, but it doesn't feel like that. I don't want to be jumping into a game where it's like here in the core, before we get into the X packs, season 1, season 2, and various expansions, I've got 6 missions to play. But really, if a tutorial is the first one and it's kind of stripped down a little bit, then I really only have 5 missions. Dungeon Saga is not like that. Mission 1 and Mission 2 tutorials, they're actually missions in themselves, and they play into the story and they lead into the game. What's interesting how they handled it, and then, of course, any suggestions for other games and mechanics that you think do really, really well. You have 4 character classes in the game, and it's an one versus many game. One player controls the minions, they're the overlord, and the other 4 players, or if you're going to double up, the other players control the 4 characters. You've got the barbarian that deals lots and lots of damage, light armor. You've got the dwarf, deals good damage, but of course the classic tank. You've got the elven archer, ranged, and then you have the magic user who is mostly ranged, very, very powerful, but you have resource management in terms of spells. You just can't be zapping everything, and of course, the least amount of life, no armor, no dodge dice, very, very squishy and easy to get killed. So what's interesting with the tutorial is the first tutorial has the dwarf and the barbarian making their way to the undead dwarf's king hold. And they have to breach the first door. So the focus of the game shows you movement and close combat. And it does this through the 2 characters that do not have ranged attacks, that are close combat. And although the barbarian is a little bit weaker in terms of life, he's still very, very strong. So you have a tutorial that also gives you lots of life to learn the game and play the game out very, very quickly and is somewhat forgiving. So you bash your way through some undead. And of course, the undead are a mix of skeletons that can be summoned. And when they're destroyed, if they get converted to a bone pile, they can be resummoned. So you have to learn to navigate this corridor and be mindful of reinforcements from behind. Then when you breach the door, it leads to the second mission. And this tutorial mission has now the other 2 characters making their way into the hold from a different entrance. You have the archer and the magic user, the wizard. So now you have ranged combat and hand management being introduced. There's less monsters you have to initially face, and those monsters tend to be more ranged combat in themselves. So now you get to deal with how to navigate, run and gun, and do those aspects. Once you've completed that second tutorial, and again, it's more of a mission, now in the third mission, the four are united. And this is where things get really, really intense in terms of different types of undead, different classes of undead, a lot of different special effects, and a lot to explore in the dungeon, including a lot of dead ends that force you to backtrack. I'm not going to give away any spoilers for those of you who are maybe thinking of jumping into this game at some point. But in looking at it, the tutorial, I don't feel like I'm playing a tutorial. And even having made my way through the main campaign a couple of times, pulling it out now, getting ready to bring it to the club and play again, I love the tutorial because it doesn't feel like you're playing one. What other titles in your collection, and it doesn't have to be just fantasy RPG dungeon crawler type games, really capture that essence of the tutorial well?